Hi everyone, my name is Sohan Paul, and this is my Lab 6 for Physics 2 Magnetic Molasses. The purpose of this lab was to investigate how a falling magnet induces eddy currents in a conductive tube and eventually causes magnetic forces that slow its motion. To conduct this experiment, we used an aluminum foil, cardboard tube, and a meter stick, and simulated our results on GlowScript. Our experiment time ended up being 2 seconds faster than our computational time. To explain the results we saw in simulation and in experiment, we use Faraday's law of conduction, which states that a time-varying magnetic flux through a conductive tube induces an electromotive force that drives current in the loop, and the Lenz's law, which describes the direction of those currents and how they oppose the change in flux that produced it. Several initial conditions of our experiment are given, including the tube length and various other characteristics of the tube and the magnetic mass itself. To formulate our computational model and explain our experimental results, we first made clear what was the system and surroundings of our experiment. The system was identified to be the bar magnet, and the surroundings were everything that acted on the bar magnet, which included the aluminum foil tube and the Earth. Keeping all this in mind, we performed 5 trials of dropping the magnet through the aluminum foil tube and got the following fall times. After several trials of our physical experiment, we moved on to the computational GlowScript model. This model simulates a falling bar magnet by applying key electromagnetic principles that govern its motion through a conducting tube. We treat the magnet as a magnetic dipole and calculate the magnetic field as it produces at each aluminum ring. As the magnet moves, the magnetic flux through each ring changes. As it gets closer to one ring, the magnetic flux increases, and it gets further away from others, it decreases in those rings. And the code uses Faraday's law to compute the induced electromotive force and the resulting ring currents. By Lenz's law, these currents should oppose the chains that produce them, so the code computes the direction and magnitude of these currents accordingly. Each current-carrying ring then generates a magnetic field that interacts with the magnet, and the code uses Lorenz's force, or the magnetic dipole force law, to calculate the upward magnetic force acting on the falling magnet. It then combines this magnetic force with gravity using Newton's second law to update the magnet's acceleration, velocity, and position at each time step. The simulation loops through these steps, showing how induced currents create magnetic damping that slows the magnet's fall. There are several assumptions and sources of error that could explain the 2 seconds of difference in fall time between our experimental model and our GlowScript model. These include the fact that in the GlowScript model, the bar magnet is treated as an ideal point magnet with a constant dipole moment. Additionally, the tube itself is assumed to remain perfectly rigid, stationary, and is also assumed to be uniformly conductive, with no variation in foil thickness. This leads to possible sources of error, which include the overestimation of ring currents, which could be caused by the neglecting of the mutual inductance between the different parts of the tube, and the fact that the foil roll itself is not a perfectly cylindrical conductor. We are now prompted to reflect on the results of our experiment through 2 what-if questions. We're first asked, what if the resistivity of the conductor itself were reduced to as close as possible to 0? The tube itself would then support a very large eddy current, because with resistance going down, current would have to go up to maintain conservation of energy. This would create a very strong opposing magnetic field, since the current would still go in the same direction, and the magnet would essentially stop and float slowly, approaching eventually 0 terminal velocity. What if holes or slots were cut into the tube? How would this affect the ring current in your model? This breaks current loops, which essentially increases resistance and would then reduce the eddy current to maintain conservation of energy, and therefore reduce the magnetic braking, and the magnet would fall even faster.